Hello, everyone. Welcome to Faculty Spotlights for the College of Professional Psychology at the Chicago School. I'm Lance Garrison, Dean of the college, and I am joined today by Dr. Jordan Jacobowitz, a faculty member in our PsyD clinical psychology program in Chicago. Welcome, Dr. Jacobowitz.
Thank you.
Maybe we could start by you telling us a little bit about your background and how it came to be that you're a faculty member with our clinical psychology program there in Chicago.
Sure. I have a long background since I've been at the school for 35 years and have been in the field for about 50 plus years. Just so briefly, I maybe start with the B. I graduated from New York University, and even there had the privilege to work with a number of fairly well-known faculty, and particularly those in the psychoanalytic field. So I got an early support and encouragement and education within that perspective. After I graduated NYU and where I majored in psychology, I had the opportunity to travel to Israel. And one of the projects I did while at NYU actually had to do with alternate ways of people organizing their society and culture. I did that project with Dr. Robert Holt, who is a fairly well-known analyst. And so I went to Israel. I stayed at a kibbutz and got a sense of what communal living is like, and actually liked it. And while I was there, I enrolled in graduate school at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem in Israel. And they originally told me it was like a 2-year program to do the MA, but turned out that was took me about 5 years to finish that program. And I had to work my way through it. And it was a program in clinical psychology. When I graduated, I actually sort of got connected there. I got married, started having kids, and so I enrolled in the doctoral program, which was a Ph.D. program there. I went on to finish my doctorate, and while there, I had the opportunity to work as a psychologist at Hebrew University Hadassah Hospital, and worked, eventually was sort of one of the supervising psychologists in the outpatient unit for adults, the inpatient unit for adults. And the last few years, I worked at the child and adolescent outpatient program at that hospital. While there, I also did research. I was eventually associate director of the, at that time, probably the first research program on aging in Israel. And I worked my job was a lot to do with the sort of methodological aspects of running that. There was a sort of started off cross-sectional, then longitudinal study, lasted about 10 years under the directorship of Professor Joel Shannon. So I had quite a varied background, clinical background back then. After about 13 years or so, came back to the States. I actually, given my background in research and aging, my doctorate was on aging processes, how people cope with aging. I got a position at Northwestern Memorial Hospital in Chicago at the Older Adult program, and so I was there to study the clinical psychology aspects of aging. My research was on normal aspects of aging.
Yeah.
While at Northwestern Memorial Hospital, my first, you might say, boss at the clinic there was Dr. Nancy Newton, who at that time was also, I think, the dean of students at the old Chicago School of Professional Psychology.
Oh, wow.
This was about 1984, 1985. And eventually she asked me if I would teach as an adjunct courses on assessment. Assessment was one of my areas of specialization.
Yeah.
So I started teaching assessment. Dr. Newton, about a year later, left Northwestern Memorial Hospital and I think became one of the deans at Chicago School of Professional Psychology. And so I took her job at Northwestern Memorial Hospital. And sort of ran the older adult clinic at the hospital. I also at that time took on a lot of practicum students from the Chicago School. They came to Northwestern and those interested in aging because it was a clinic for people 55 years and older. As time went on, I eventually was offered a half-time core faculty position at the Chicago School, which was about 5 years later, about 1993. I took that position and eventually went down to a half-time position at Northwestern University. So for the next about 15 years or so, I taught half-time. Well, I'll change that. I taught at the Chicago School and half-time at Northwestern University. About the second year I was at the Chicago School, which I enjoyed and was at that time, it was sort of just growing as an institution. It was a very idealistic group of people who wanted to integrate diversity and clinical psychology, and it was a nonprofit organization, so there was a sort of a lot of idealistic ideas and approaches and perspectives among the faculty. And the second year I was there, the dean of students left, so they asked me if I could spend half time doing the dean of students position and half time regular faculty, which I did. And then after that, I became full-time faculty there. And for about, like I say, about 10, 15 years, I also continued teaching at Northwestern. So I did both. Eventually, I left Northwestern and focused at the Chicago School. Historically, though, in terms of background, I had background in child, adult, and older adults. So I always looked at myself as a kind of lifespan clinical psychologist with a psychodynamic kind of and systems sort of orientation. Anyway, that was my background, and I've been at the Chicago School, done many things. I originally was running the course stream coordinator for the psychoanalytic. Later, I became course stream coordinator of all the assessment training for many years at Chicago School. About 8 or 9 years ago, they needed someone to also take over the quantitative course. So I began a course lead of the quantitative, given my early research background. So I've been doing that. So that's how I came to be in Chicago School.
Incredible history. Yeah, I was just thinking about it. I've been with the Chicago School a little over 8 years now, but you have been involved in one form or another with the Chicago School for almost as long as the Chicago School's been around.
Right. Yeah, I think it was about 8 or 9 years old when I originally joined them.
That's pretty incredible. I can only imagine, I know some of the history through stories and reading, but you've watched the Chicago School go through some tremendous changes over those years.
Right.
Yeah. When you began teaching, it was a single program in a single location.
Right.
Yeah, quite a bit of change since then.
I think it was about maybe 12, 13 faculty members, and I would say maybe 150, 160 students altogether.
Yeah. Wow, just incredible. So, what areas of teaching or research or practice are you most passionate about these days?
Well, like I said, I've always kept my interest in assessment, and I still teach assessment courses, particularly assessment of how I would call it the inner world, the inner psychological world of the person. So I'm very much into projective tests, and probably one of the remaining individuals or practitioners with interest in the Rorschach test. given my
Yeah,
history of
there's a
training.
question. It's a question I was going to ask you, with given your psychoanalytic background, if projectives were the area of assessment that you had kind of the most passion for. I will admit that in graduate school and after moving into clinical practice, projectives are my least favorite form of assessment.
Right,
But I understand the value. I've always found them very challenging.
right. In fact, last year I gave an elective on the Rorschach. There were a collection of students who were very interested in that, and we had it's one of the most gratifying course because all it was an elective, and these were students who were really interested and committed to both the Rorschach and psychodynamic
Yeah,
thinking. So that went
that is
quite well.
fantastic. Yeah. Um,
Um,
oh yeah, did you want to add some to that?
well, I've always continued to be interested in aging because I spent
Yeah.
both my years of studying normal aging and spent about 9, 10 years at Northwestern working with older adults. And now I myself am aging, so
Mhm.
some that's also a continued interest of mine, as well as
Yeah.
lifespan development of how the different phases. You're a kid one day, and next day you're older person. How time goes and how it's all connected. So that's another interest
Yeah.
that I have.
Yeah, it is interesting. As I'm getting older and my kids are getting older, I felt this sense of time compression because it does feel
Hmm.
like one day you're a kid and the next day you're an adult and the next day you're an older adult, and the years that have passed, um, you don't feel them from a sense of time perspective. It's fascinating.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. I mean, I have a granddaughter who's a teenager. I remember when I was a teenager, it's sort of hard to grasp, but yeah.
uh, um, when you think about the work that you do, um, how do you see that impacting students or the broader community?
Yeah, like I said, I've been in the field for a
Yeah,
long time, so I've had different phases. I would say currently my main focus is educating students.
yeah,
Speaking of grandkids, I mean, I have students that I train and I have grand students that I train. In fact, president of university used to be one of my students at Chicago School,
oh,
and
that's right.
Dr. Horowitz was my student over at Northwestern.
That's
So,
incredible.
um, so I think I don't know, I didn't do a count, but I wouldn't be surprised if I didn't train at least 1,000
Yeah,
psychologists over the years, or people who become psychologists. So I look at this point in my life, the major contribution has been
yeah,
training all these psychologists who then are in the community. Um, and a lot of the people I train are training others. So I
yeah.
think my connection these days, or the past 10 years in particular, has been via education or educating psychologists in the field.
Yeah, and I think as you shared your history and background and the work that you've done over the years, I mean that kind of alone is a tremendous impact and a wonderful legacy. But one of the things that I think is really beautiful about the impact that you're having, that you've had, that you'll continue to have, is that training of students. Because I remember many years ago, when I was in clinical practice, thinking about the impact of the work that I was doing, and began teaching as an adjunct, and thought, oh, you know what? You can really begin to scale your impact in a wonderful way when you start training the next generation of clinical psychologists. And you know, to your point, having been a part of the education of thousands of students over the years, that's a really important and wonderful impact that you had. So thank you. Um, so having been with the Chicago School and having been with that program, that clinical psychology program, there in Chicago for as long as you have. What do you think makes that program unique or especially valuable to students who participate in it?
Yeah, I've always thought that the sort of heart of the Chicago School has been its faculty.
Hmm.
Uh, um, in terms of curriculum, these days with APA accreditation, I would assume most clinical programs have more or less similar kinds of
Yeah.
curriculum. But I've found that the sort of, like I say, the heart and soul of the Chicago School has been its faculty. We've had a very diverse faculty in terms of their perspectives, their personalities. Each person has had their own area of
Hmm.
expertise. And I think what I've enjoyed is everyone gets along with each other, that
Yeah.
there's a kind of respect for different perspectives and different ways of being. I think the faculty at Chicago School, I mean, they're all essentially clinicians or professional psychologists, but they really enjoy education.
Yeah.
And I think that if you like the uniqueness or the specialness is that devotion to students and the desire to um, foster the development of students as they go through their training.
Yeah.
And the students get these different perspectives from different
Yeah.
faculty, each of whom respect the other. So there's this sort of collective, I think, integrative way of students getting a feel for the field and feeling comfortable in
Yeah.
choosing their own pathway, their
Yeah.
own particular perspective, and being respected for it. I always found that very I don't know, special about Chicago School. That
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah. Being the dean, I don't have an opportunity to get to know every faculty member at the level that I would really like to get to know them. And these conversations are kind of part of that for me. It's a lot of fun for me to get to know the faculty. And I appreciate this conversation with you very much. But I will say I agree, having been able to visit a couple of faculty meetings for the clinical program there in Chicago. It's a pretty special group. It's a large group. It's a large
mhm,
faculty. I think you have 20 20 plus faculty,
mhm,
and very diverse, but very committed to the student experience and making sure that when they leave the program, they're the best clinical psychologists that they can be.
mhm.
So having seen the number of students you've seen over the years, do you have some advice for someone who's considering pursuing the path of a doctoral degree in clinical psychology?
Yeah, in fact, last year, we tend some of the faculty give these talks that are, I guess, also recorded for candidates.
Yeah.
I gave a talk more or less on that topic about a year ago. I think that the field of psychology, like the world in general, has been changing quite a bit
Yeah.
given technological advances and artificial intelligence. And these days, we're also seeing major political changes and so forth. And another big thing that's changed since I've been in the field is the impact of insurance companies on clinical practice and so forth.
Yeah.
It just seems that the field and the populations that we work with and the kinds of psychopathologies that one comes into contact with has changed, is changing.
Yeah.
So I've always kind of believed, going back a long time ago, the way I was trained to really try to establish a generalist uh, sort of core of understanding people, empathy, respect, but just general knowledge of, the basic cognitive, affective, developmental,
Yeah.
social, emotional, and cognitive aspects of people and communities and cultures and how it all works together.
Yeah.
And that people should try to, as much as possible, grasp and learn about these core basic human, how we call it human issues that every human being has as they go through time, And then once you master that kind of basic understanding and develop a certain identity and a certain perspective of your understanding of people and their nature, then later on to specialize,
Yeah.
and to then say, oh, this subpopulation I'm really interested in for this or that reason, or these kinds of pathologies I'm really interested in, and then get more and more involved and specialize in those areas. But so my general recommendation is try to be open to the to different perspectives, to general basic foundation knowledge, and worry about specialization later, which
Yeah.
is somewhat a challenge because there's so much push. Everyone wants to start off, I want to be this, that, or that. And I try to get people to be more open because I've seen
Yeah.
so many people change their orientation. They say, oh, I want to be a child psychologist, and they work with children, decide they want to do something else.
Maybe children aren't my thing after all.
Right. Or I've seen, train people with older people and they didn't think they'd ever want to work with older people. And some of them got very
Yeah.
interested in working with
Fall in
older.
love with
It takes a while and experience to figure out what you want to do while you're building your basic foundational skills. So
Yep.
I would try to say to people, don't rush,
Yeah. Give
learn as
yourself
much as you
time.
be open and let experience guide you in what you want to become,
Yeah.
or specialize in or do later on.
You'll find your niche along the way, right?
Right.
Well, Dr. Jacobowitz, thank you so much for joining me today. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Yeah, and I enjoyed talking to you. I think just like the faculty like to have more access to deans as much as the deans.
Well, we'll do this more often then.